Have you ever wanted to spend more time online? Have you ever felt like you and your kids don't get enough unhindered screen time? Me too. I mean, not the kids part. I don't have kids because the left side of my penis was sheared off when I fell down at the top of an escalator. But I do want to spend more time on the internet, looking at sites and images and videos and text. Luckily for me and luckily for you, you can now dive into the internet and never leave thanks to the new Apple Vision Pro headset. Look like a cool spaceman while you wear these stylish goggles that make the world your web browser. Use code FISHBABY at checkout and get your headset with the Secret Society of Fly Tires app pre-installed. The VR version of the podcast is way more intense and explicit than the audio version. I enjoyed the podcast on the Apple Vision Pro headset, and I can tell you that it was so much more than I could have imagined. The sights, the sounds, the colors, the textures, the moisture. I don't know how they do it, but I was absolutely drenched by the end of the episode, and I loved it. I love the internet. I love being jacked into the mainframe. I love Apple products and computers and technologies. I hope someday Apple will create something that can help me with my sheared off wiener, but until then, I will happily enjoy the Secret Society of Fly Tires on my brand new Apple Vision Pro headset.
You have successfully connected to the Secret Society of Fly Tires podcast.
Hi, everybody, and good morning or good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to another episode of Secret Society of Fly Tires. Just like that, we're at the halfway point through Season 3. I'd like to tell you that numbers are up and engagement is high, but I have no clue. I'm writing and recording all these episodes before I release anything. I've been wondering, has my podcast jumped the shark? You would tell me, right? You know, like the Fonz, who happens to be a fly tire, jumping his water skis over an actual shark on the infamous Happy Days episode.
Look at that shark, Pods. Yeah. How could you accept the challenge?
I feel like there's a good chance that I have, and just like me asking you if I've been putting on a phony podcaster's voice, I really hope that you'll tell me. Please, just tell me. Send me an email and put me out of my misery.
You've got mail.
Something simple like, Matt, look, I'm sorry, but don't waste your time anymore. That was my impression of you emailing me. It won't hurt my feelings. In fact, I'm laughing to myself while I write this, just thinking about my inbox being full of comments and DMs asking me what the hell I'm doing with this show. It might even motivate me to release more content if I'm being honest. Sometimes a little adversity is just what you need to improve, you know? Hypothetically, if you were going to share my show with a friend, and I hope you do that, how would you describe the show? Do you just tell them you've been listening to a fly fishing podcast and leave out any further details? Let them go in blind? Because the more I think about it, I don't think giving an actual description would help much. Hey, my friend, I found this podcast about fly tying and the host barely talks about flies. In fact, one whole episode was basically about his friend who is ashamed at his incredibly long, papery farts. That might work, right? Or maybe something like, hey dude, I know you're into tying up your own flies. Check out this podcast that's supposed to be about that, but the host just spent the majority of an episode talking about tattooing his penis and another one talking about poking fun at his neighbor's gay dogs. I don't think those will work. Or actually, maybe they will. I'd love to see a screen grab of you guys trying to convince someone to check out my show. Send me one, and I'll mail you some stickers or something. Did I launch my store yet? Maybe if I did, I'll send someone a t-shirt. If I don't have a store yet, I will soon. I got some merch ideas that I think are pretty cool, and I hope you will too. Chances are it'll start with a Kickstarter or something though, so I don't lose my ass on a big t-shirt order that nobody wants. I'm not sure if you realized this, but it costs money to do that kind of stuff. And actually, if my calculations are correct, I should be rich right about now in real money.
I'm one of the richest people that ever lived.
Yes!
You see, this podcast is based on the value for value model. I serve up the content, and you get to enjoy it. And by enjoy it, I mean you donating to the show out of the goodness of your heart. There is no monetary figure presented to access this show, unless you have already joined the Diamond Platinum Plus tier. You determine what you'd like to pay me for my services on your own, based on how much you appreciate the content. and I have provided so much high-value content that it can only result in a large amount of donations from my very gracious listeners. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
If anything, it'll help me get back on track with my ever-growing crippling financial debt that I have piling up with my pal the Worm. His services aren't free. It takes hard work and valuable time to create all these fake commercials we keep forcing on you. The Toyota Prius ad alone cost me about $300 of money.
$350.
Okay, sorry, I was almost right. I promise I will square up with the Worm soon. I hope he doesn't send me to collections. Anyways, I haven't even told you who my guest is for this episode. It's my new friend Rob Beckius from Two Hand Hardware Company. You might already be familiar with him. He seems to know a lot of people, and he sells goods online aimed at two-handed anglers. I posted on Instagram about a fly box I bought from him not long after our interview, and I love it. It's the exact box that I have been looking for. It's a plastic Hytina box with little rectangle-shaped tubes that fit perfectly inside the box. Your tube flies fit perfectly inside of those little tubes.
The inner tube and the outer tube are separated by a space that we call the coelom, which will become the body cavity in the adult human. And that coelom is what we cut into when we're dissecting in the lab, whether it's a fetal pig or a cat or even a human cadaver.
Okay, that one doesn't exactly fit, but it made me laugh, so I'm going to keep it there. I know it's the wrong kind of tube.
The endodermal inner tube is what we call the digestive tube or the gut tract, and it runs back towards the tail end and meets the outer tube at the anus, which will eventually become where feces are expelled from the adult body. That endoderm would run to the head end and meet the outer tube at the mouth, or really right at the start of the esophagus.
I'm sorry. Back to my script. It's tubeception. I think the small box holds 7 of the small tube inserts, and it is literally the perfect fly box for tube flies to throw in your wader pocket for a quick session. You'll hear Rob tell me about them during the interview, and I turned around and bought one shortly after we talked. Turns out he was 100% correct that it was the one that I needed. Those same boxes also fit his magnet inserts, which are basically a sheet of foam with holes punched in them to cram some magnets in as your posts for each fly. It's an innovative way to stash your flies and keep them looking pristine before you get them all wet and slimy. He sells a few different types of great-looking fly boxes that all accept those magnet inserts. And he also sells some fly patterns that he loves, some other random accessories and apparel, and he even puts those magnets into the brim of his ball caps. Another great idea that he came up with for when you need to make a quick change on the river. Just cut off the fly and stick it on your head, you goose. Don't forget that it's there, though, and tear your hat off in anger when you misplay a fish and impale your hand on the hook. Rob and I talked about a whole bunch of stuff, including his home water, the Rogue River in southern Oregon. But this episode is not about the Rogue. That'll definitely happen eventually, and maybe even with Rob. But this one is about his two-hand hardware company, which, as a writer, puts me in a little bit of a bind because it's pretty easy to get words down on paper when you have a solid subject to write about, like a specific river. Instead, I sit here in front of my laptop trying to figure out where to take this one.
So you sit down, you open your journal, and you have no idea what to write. That blank page is staring back at you, and you're staring back at it, and it's staring back at you, and you're just doing a staring contest at this point.
I thought about finally telling you all about my own personal fly tying mentor, which I haven't discussed much on this show, if at all. Yeah, that'll be the first little story of this episode. I guess I've been kind of keeping it to myself, because my Uncle Troy, who taught me how to tie my first fly, is a very private person. I mentioned him in the critically acclaimed film The Worm and I put together a few years ago called Fly Fishing in America, but he didn't want to be on camera for that, so we just talked about him and his ailments without actually showing him. And ever since his accident, he mostly keeps to himself. I try to be open and honest on this show, and I tell you all pretty much everything going through my childlike brain. Everything from my personal mental issues to my most embarrassing moments. So I figured this story was fair game. Besides, Uncle Troy doesn't even listen to podcasts, and he doesn't have social media either, so he'll be none the wiser. Uncle Troy kept his first real job for pretty much his whole life. It paid well enough to keep him comfortable, and he grew to enjoy the work. He was a bovine breeding specialist. That's a fancy title for someone who artificially impregnates cows on a farm. Sounds fun, right? He worked day and night, inseminating all sorts of cows. And if you didn't know already, in order to do that, he'd have to reach his arms elbow deep into the rumps of these cows, and one time, while he was mid-job and about forearm deep in a heifer, the cow got spooked and clamped its hole down so tightly that it cut off Troy's circulation, and it took nearly 2 hours for the cow to calm down enough to release him. And by that time, the lack of blood flow had ruined his hand and it had to be amputated. He said, and I quote, "I wouldn't feel level with just one hand." He desperately craved the symmetry his body once had, and he pretty much instantly grew to hate his one working hand. And not long after he woke up from his initial surgery, he asked the doctors to remove the still good hand, since they were going to have their limb-chopping shears out anyway. 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 hands with 1 cow-anus. That's what Uncle Troy always used to say. He stood by his decision, and to this day feels that he made the right move. But sadly, this seemed like the end of his beloved fly tying hobby. As you all probably know, most of the techniques utilized in fly tying take 2 hands. Some people even tie flies in hand without a vise.
I think I just got an idea.
And that's what actually made a light bulb go off in Uncle Troy's head one day while sitting at home wishing he was still able to do the things he loved, like twisting up trout bugs and getting elbow deep in all the cattle on his farm. He quickly gathered up some materials from his now dusty fly tying bench and shoved them all in his mouth. After a few weeks of practice, Uncle Troy was able to tie multiple different patterns in mouth, which is very badass. He did it just like you would tie a cherry stem into a knot in your mouth using only your tongue. He really had surprising dexterity with his tongue muscles. You veteran tiers out there that say you can tie intruders and things in hand have nothing on Uncle Troy tying in mouth. I dare you to not be a pussy and try it right now. Actually, I can't dare you to put sharp things in your mouth. That would be irresponsible, and I don't need another lawsuit from someone whose mouth is now full of new fishhook-related piercings because I challenge them to be as badass as my Uncle Troy.
Badass mother who don't take no crap off of nobody.
You won't be a pussy if you don't try it. I didn't mean it. Troy doesn't even exist, and this story is one big dumb lie anyway, so stop now. Take the hooks and squirrel zonkers out of your mouth immediately, even if they taste good. Sorry, I had to write at least one dumb story to play off the 2 hands part of Rob's company 2 Hand Hardware. I couldn't help myself. Pardon this interruption for a brief word from our sponsors.
What do all the best foods have in common? Is it that they're wet and slimy? No. Is it that they're thick and throbbing as they slide down your hungry gullet? No. Is it that they're bitter and sulfuric? No. Is it that they're filled with parasites and pathogens? Yes, but that's not the point. The point here is that all the best foods are made out of wheat. Wheat is a type of branch that grows out of the ground and contains delicious seeds that farmers then carefully pluck and clean and grind into a fine powder. Us home cooks then use said powder in a plethora of delicious applications. Think about it. Pizza is basically bread topped with different slops and goops, and the main ingredient in bread is wheat. The same is true with pasta. It's just wheat that somebody mushed into a tube shape and then dried, and then you boiled it with different slops and goops. And of course there's breadsticks. Delicious, savory, garlicky breadsticks from Olive Garden's never-ending super salad and breadsticks deal. Stop by any participating Olive Garden location and hork down unlimited piles of breadsticks. It's incredible. The last time I was there, I ate 65 breadsticks, and I could have eaten more, but I got really bad diarrhea, and they refused to serve me more breadsticks in the bathroom, which doesn't even make sense if you ask me. I was still on Olive Garden property. They could have slid the sticks under the stall door. I would have gladly dipped their floppy, underbaked breadsticks into their home-style marinara or thick, creamy Alfredo sauce while I emptied my guts into the Thunder Bucket. I would have loved that, and I told the manager this over and over, but he refused. That's why I'm in the middle of what is sure to be a lengthy litigation process with Olive Garden over the terms of their never-ending super salad with breadsticks deal. I truly believe that I'm in the right on this one, and they should have provided me with the sticks I crave while I was vomiting out of my butthole into the toilet. The breadsticks were falsely advertised as, quote, never-ending, when they clearly ended with the manager said it was too stinky for him to bring more freshly baked sticks into the bathroom for me. Who cares if it's a little smelly in there? It's a bathroom. Get used to it. Also, I had eaten 65 breadsticks covered in Alfredo sauce. Did you expect it to smell like freshly baked cookies, you fool? I said this to the manager while we were in court as I was representing myself, and the judge got super mad and made me get strapped into one of those Hannibal Lecter-style gurneys with the mouth guard thing. It sucked, but you cannot argue with a judge. The court is their domain, and I had to respect that. So I had to spend the rest rest of that day strapped onto a padded board with a weird metal mask over my mouth while the bailiff wheeled me around. That wasn't my proudest day, but I'll do whatever it takes to get Olive Garden to admit that their breadsticks aren't truly never-ending, since they wouldn't bring them to me in the bathroom. Anyway, enough about me. This episode of the Secret Society of Fly Tires is brought to you by Eggo Waffles. Eggo Waffles. Lego my Eggo. I was always surprised that Eggo Waffles and Lego never did a collaborative product release. The Eggo ads said the word Lego all the time. The Lego company could have released waffle and syrup building kits, or the Eggo company could have released limited edition frozen waffles that had little Legos cooked into them. It's a match made in heaven, and I'll happily create a commercial for this incredible brand crossover now if that's what it takes to make this happen. Introducing Lego Eggos, the delicious frozen waffle you know and love combined with the fun plastic toy bricks that you played with as a child. Lego Eggos combine the nutritious fluffy waffles and sharp rectangular toys in a new and innovative way which will leave you and your family satisfied. So head on down to your local grocery or toy store and pick up a box of Lego Eggos today. The waffles are chock full of Lego bricks and they do pose a significant choking hazard for children and the elderly, so please, eat with caution.
Okay, I thought of something else weird to tie into this episode. It's going to work nicely too because a good amount of Two-Hand Hardware Company products include magnets in some capacity, and Rob has found some creative ways to use them. This is a really fun and true magnet story.
I don't know how magnets work. You know what I'm saying?
Have you ever heard of Rupus nigra? It is believed to be a 33-mile-wide black magnetic rock located at the magnetic North Pole or at the North Pole itself. It purportedly explains why all compasses point north, and this island or rock was featured on many maps from the 16th and 17th centuries.
The good old days.
I gotta be careful here, because this is treading dangerously close to flat Earth material, and I still haven't made that conspiracy leap. Yet. I can't say for certain if I'll end up crossing over into that territory, but for now I can't buy it.
Oh, you will.
And I want to buy all this high strangeness and conspiracy stuff. I want to believe in not believing anything being fed to me, which is a confusing way to live, but don't try to make sense of it. That isn't going to help anyone. This island first appeared on Gerardus Mercator's 1569 map of the world, the famous Mercator projection popular today, in his depiction of the Arctic, arguably the first detailed cartographical depiction of the Arctic in history. Mercator described the area in a letter to the original 007 and 16th century occultist that spoke to angels using the Enochian keys, John Dee. Mercator told Dee, in the midst of the four countries is a whirlpool, into which there empty these four indrawing seas, which divide the north, and the water rushes around and descends into the earth, just as if one were pouring it through a filter funnel. It is 4 degrees wide on every side of the pole, that is to say 8 degrees altogether, except that right under the pole there lies a bare rock in the midst of the sea. Its circumference is almost 33 French miles, and it is all of magnetic stone. Are French miles different than regular miles? American miles? On the map, the Rupus nigra can be seen surrounded by the 4 countries, all of which are labeled with Latin texts. Some people on the internet that claim to read and understand Latin translated what is labeled on the map about 2 of those islands. The island on the bottom right is labeled with some Latin that I will not even try to pronounce, but it is said to be translated as something like this. Here live pygmies, and something about long feet, like those in Greenland that are called Skraelinger. The island to the north of Pygmy Land is also labeled in Latin with a translation supposedly being something like, this narrow channel has a harbor, and due to its narrowness and swift current, never freezes. Is pygmy a politically correct term, or is this going to get me in trouble? I mean no harm. Now, a quick Google search will bring up a bunch of supposedly logical answers for this that explain away all of it as total nonsense from map makers that were documenting areas that they had never seen with their own eyes. But there are tales of sailors whose ships were sucked up into this giant magnetic rock and crumpled up into big metal balls by the sheer force of the 33-mile-wide magnet mountain. Are you going to believe some Reddit nerd or a badass grizzled sailor? I feel like the world we live in and the reality we all experience or project or hallucinate or whatever is actually happening within our consciousness is way weirder than anyone wants to admit.
Since I was a little boy, I always felt that existence as such was weird.
I will admit that the magnetic rock at the North Pole sounds pretty far-fetched, but sometimes old wives' tales and rumors turn out to be true. like Richard Gere in the famous gerbil story, for instance.
So I was watching the whole thing when it came out before, they ran around and they got crazy and everyone was happy.
Or Rod Stewart getting his stomach pumped because he swallowed too much of his friends' and bandmates' semen.
Well, it doesn't, but I don't want to be late. I don't like to keep my customers waiting.
Both of those stories turned out to be 100% true, allegedly. And this magnet rock might be true too, okay?
Open your mind.
Am I being totally stupid and crazy in relating this mythical magnetic black rock back to the giant company people say controls the world that is also called Black Rock?
Is it possible this story is true? Yes, it is. You're right.
Why the 33-mile rock? That's a Masonic number. Do these people know something that we don't know? The powers that be love to mock us and throw this kind of thing right in our faces because there's nothing we can do about it. And when it comes to ritual occult magic, telling the subjects of said ritual exactly what they're going to do to or with them while they are doing it is referred to as the revelation of the method. Here's a quick quote from author Michael Hoffman, who talked about it in his book, Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare. The alchemical principle of the revelation of the method has at its chief component a clown-like grinning mockery of the victims as a show of power and macabre arrogance. When this is performed in a veiled manner, accompanied by certain occult signs and symbolic words, and elicits no meaningful response of opposition or resistance from the targets, it is one of the most efficacious techniques of psychological warfare and mind rape. Do not let them rape your mind, whatever you do. And check out that book. And also, surf on over to twohandhardwareco.com and peruse Rob's wares. He may just have exactly what you need. He has many things that I want and need. It was a pleasure to meet him virtually and learn about how he started his company and his local water. He's not that far north from me either, so I'm going to pester him next time I'm driving through Grants Pass to take me fishing or at least grab a bite or a drink. I'm going to let you eavesdrop on us, meeting on Zoom for the first time, right about now. Okay, well, hey, Happy New Year, dude.
Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, is it too late to say Happy New Year? I know we're a week into 2024, and you know, now whenever I say it, I always think of that Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Larry David throws a big fit about it.
I don't think so. I mean,
Right.
you know, I think it becomes a problem when you've like seen the same person probably 2 or 3 times. You tell them Happy New Year every time, they're probably going to look at you like, all right, you know, we're good now.
Or the see you next year.
Yeah,
That's
the other one.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, dude. I try to make this podcast, you know, about meeting people and learning about the craft of fly tying and just being stupid and silly overall and not taking fly fishing or tying too seriously. And
Sure.
you know, I try not to hawk products, but when I do ask someone from a company that makes stuff for the kind of people that listen to the show to come on and chat, it's because I personally really dig what they're doing. And Two-Handed Hardware is definitely that. I love the fly boxes and the magnet hats and even just the logo is cool. You know, I love I love casting a two-handed rod. So of course I'm drawn to it.
Right.
But let's do this. I had a pre-podcast cookie and it was delicious and I'm all primed up. It's not a medicinal cookie. I save those for after the interview because I get all
right. Of course.
I get all weird, but and I'm sorry in advance if I ask any dumb questions. I try to prepare for these, and every time I seem to miss some important, easy to find info on my guests.
No problem.
I end up feeling like a fool. But let's start with the basics. Have you done a podcast interview before?
I have not.
Oh, awesome! I love that.
This is the first one for us.
Love it. So where are you from, and where do you call home now?
So Grants Pass, Oregon, so not far from you. If you're in Sacramento, we're just a bit north.
Totally.
Headquartered, you know, kind of situated right on the Rogue River. I live about 5 minutes from the Rogue River, just in the town of Grants Pass.
Cool.
You know, gives me a chance to really try to get out on the water at least once a day, but you know, usually depending on weather, doesn't quite happen that much. So I try to spend at least, you know, an hour or so every day throughout the year, you know, sometimes fishing, but it's mostly casting.
Yeah. It sounds like what I do, but I don't get out there every day. But I live real close to the river, the Lower American River here in Sacramento, and I'm lucky that I can get out there and cast for an hour or two when I can.
Yeah.
The Rogue's your home water then?
Yeah, the Rogue is the home water. We have a Applegate River, one of the major tributaries of the Rogue, is a winter fishery, so January, February, March. So it's just opened up, and then we're really not too far from the North Umpqua, about an hour or two away from the north, and then the Illinois River isn't too far away either.
You're close enough to the Rogue to get out there a lot.
Oh yeah. And we're only about an hour from the Klamath, right where I-5 goes
Cool.
over the highway there at the rest stop.
Right on, man. Yeah, I mean, for living in Northern California, I don't get up to fish Oregon as much as I should. And I just got to fish the Mackenzie with a buddy and my brother. And that was
Okay.
rad. But I need to get up there and fish all the steelhead rivers. I just need to get in the car and drive up there.
Well, there's an invitation is open anytime. Send me a message and come up whenever you want.
Oh, hell yeah, man. So how did Two Hand Hardware get started? Let me hear the origin story. Like, did you come upon a giant horde of magnets and see your future, or
Actually, it's a funny story, and that's not far off from the truth. So, my day job is a design engineer. So I do all kinds of mechanical design engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I do a lot of product design for companies of just medical design, air quality.
Okay.
I do boat design for SOTAR, whitewater inflatables, and fishing frames and raft frames for raft.
Oh, cool.
But I had a medical client that had a project where they had a coupling that had all these little magnets on it. And when the project was over, I really did have about 500 of these little magnets left over, and I just stuffed them in a box, and that was that. And then over time, I mean, you're a fly fisherman, so everybody collects fly boxes. You have these damn foam fly boxes and Wheatley fly boxes, and with the metal clips and all of the knockoffs that have shown up over the years. And so I had all these fly boxes and flies sticking around. I got tired of tearing off foam and throwing out the foam, cheapo foam fly boxes. And the Wheatley boxes, I love them, but they mash down the flies. They have a tendency to pull little feathers in the hackle off. And I started playing around one day with this, this idea, like, I wonder if I can use these magnets to make a fly box where I could rearrange everything for different size flies or different styles, and do away with the foam and do away with the clips. And so I bought a piece of foam and a hole punch, because I had a bunch of hole punches from other projects, and then put them together on just had a piece of tin laying around, and so the prototype worked pretty well. Actually, I still have it. It's sitting on my shelf. But
cool.
The problem is that the tin will tend to it was a little magnet. It was a little piece of steel, real thin steel, wasn't tin, but it'll rust over time. And so I had to find a type of stainless steel that was magnetic but also wouldn't rust. And so this and then eventually just kind of grew into that, and that's just really you're spot on. Having a big pile of 500 magnets and material laying around and some foam and parts, that's kind of how it started.
Oh, that's funny, man. Yeah, I just listened to Enrico Puglisi on an old episode of April Vokey's podcast, and he was explaining that his initial source of all his artificial hair made him buy like 500 pounds of the stuff to start, and the rest is history, right? And so it's kind of a joke. It's funny.
Yeah, and being a fly tire, I didn't, over time you collect lots of crappy material, and then you actually start learning what you like. You buy good material.
Yeah, totally.
And then you realize that most of the fish don't care what it looks like. You could tie the ugliest, most out of proportion, ridiculous looking fly, and steelhead generally I don't think care too much, but fly tires do. And so you want something that displays your flies so you can show them off to your friends, or they don't get all matted up when you spend, depending on what you tied, 15 minutes to an hour trying to put the thing together.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the second motivation is what can I do with these 500 magnets? But then can I do something that's not going to tear up my flies, and it's also going to display them and kind of preserve them, take care of them. And so that's it. Just like having 500 pounds of hair is kind of necessity. Here's what I want to do, and can I make this happen?
Yeah, it's cool. They're super versatile. Like you're saying, little hackle pieces get caught, in different parts of those boxes, and it always bugs me when one's just like hanging out when you close it.
Right.
So and you can totally adjust your fly on the magnet to, move out of the way of that stuff.
Yeah, and you can move the magnets around, change for different sizes, different styles of flies.
Yeah, it's super cool. Is it just you, or are there other folks on the squad there?
It's me and my youngest daughter, who's a film school student down at Grand Canyon University. So when she's home, she gets to do all of my photography if I can drag her out and get her into a pair of waders. I have 3 kids. My middle daughter's a fisherman and the other two are not. But I dragged my youngest out with me, Kennedy, and she gets to do the photography. And now, kind of the next thing for us from a marketing standpoint is starting to roll out a YouTube channel just with, either informational videos about the product or information about Southern Oregon. We realized last year that we live in a great place, and so many people come here every year to just visit it, and we take it for granted. It's easy to do because you see it every day. But we started realizing that the things that we take as commonplace, and I mean, I don't mean take for granted, but having the luxury of being able to fish every day, and we don't think anything of it, but for that to share some of those things that we do all year long with people, we thought, well, let's start capturing this and tell them some stories about it. I mean, we float the Lower Rogue and the Lower Canyon section of the river 2 or 3 times a year. I have no problem sharing information about steelhead runs, where they are, where to find fish, especially for people coming from out of town, because I mean, I learned very quickly that with steelheaders, I always say that steelheaders are liars. They're the worst liars ever. And if they tell you, I didn't catch any fish on that run, go there the next day because I guarantee you they did. And so, part of what we're going to do with the YouTube channel is, share where we fish, how we fish, right down to kind of the time of year, because these fish are they're in peril, and so they need as many advocates as you can, and it's a lot easier to make advocates and evangelists for these fish when when people actually can connect with them, instead of letting them have to go through the decade-long learning curve that most people have with steelhead before they finally start to get somewhat competent in it.
Yeah. It's kind of a thing that I wrestle with on this podcast, because I talk about rivers a lot. I'll have like a river specific episode, and I always feel like, am I doing this wrong by maybe sending folks there to a place that maybe already has a lot of pressure or something like that? But I always end up going at least justifying it with myself that it takes a lot of effort to get to these spots and these places, and you actually have to get up and go, and a lot of people just don't, and if you can get somebody to go there and fall in love with that place, then you have another advocate there too that's doing things the right way and trying to take care of the place. Keep it in the right spot. So
that's exactly right. And that's like with me, I really, like I said, I'll take anybody out. I'll show them where to go. I'll happily share information. And I only have 2 things that I ask. Never, ever, ever keep a wild fish, especially on the Rogue River. We have a fish hatchery, and regardless of how you feel about that fish hatchery is here. And it's not going anywhere. And about half the fish that I catch are hatchery fish, and the other half are native. So turn the natives loose, keep your hatchery fish. That's kind of rule 1. And then rule 2 is just pay it forward. So when somebody needs help or is asking for information or pay that same thing forward. Make another advocate for for the fish and for the rivers and for just for the whole experience.
Yeah, man, I love it. It's cool that your daughter's helping out with the biz and is into fishing too. So I have 2 kids, 9 and 6.
Okay, cool.
And I'm hoping they'll get into fishing, and then at the same time, man, why aren't they into fishing yet? It's I don't take them enough. It's like a selfish thing, right? I want to go out and get my time in there and not just be, untangling their stuff all the time. I want to get some fishing in, and I don't take them as much as I should. But I want one of them to end up on the river with me all the time, like you're talking about your daughter. So I need to get through, get over that.
Well, like I said, I have 3. They're a bit older. My oldest is, they're let's see, 27, 24, and 20 now.
Yeah, you're a little ahead of me. Yeah.
But we took them out when we could. It's hard. I mean,
it is.
You got to take the time to do it. And I remember when they were little, we take them camping and stuff, and the back of my truck, you just piled up with stuff. You're like, how are we going to carry all this thing? You set up camp. It looks like a Fisher Price showroom blew up on a campsite.
Totally.
But they take that with them. And then, of the 3, one of them, the fishing stuck with one of them. So that was good. She's a fishy one.
That's cool.
The other 2 kind of not so much.
Yeah. It's not for everybody. I mean, I have 5 brothers and sisters, and I'm the only one that's out there on the river fishing.
Right.
You know. So give us a quick rundown of what you sell in your store, and if you have any like new stuff coming out or anything like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned the magnetic fly boxes. So we have the magnetic systems that go in Wheatley fly boxes.
And so wait, real quick though, that's like that product itself is it just an insert? Like you can kind of move that or cut it or mold it to whatever box you have and then use it like it's kind of modular like that?
Yeah, there's kind of 2 flavors for it. There's the insert, which will fit into kind of the ones that most people understand are the Wheatley metal fly boxes that people buy, and then the CNF designs ones or the plastic ones. So these guys, and so those are they have a clip inside them. They're meant to be a modular system, and so they're meant to they just clip inside this box. And then you can remove them and configure them the same way. And the same thing is true with like the magnetic ones for the Wheatley. The Wheatleys don't have the clips. They just have we sell with double-sided tape and you just stick them in with the double-sided tape that way. Yeah. But then we have 2 versions that come with the inserts installed in them. One of them is just the basic plastic polypropylene fly box that you can find almost in any fly shop. And so we sell that. And then the other one was the one that I actually grabbed one.
Yeah, and I'll link to pictures and all that stuff for this. So
what's that?
I'll show pictures and all kinds of stuff in the show notes so people can see these.
And then this is the one that this is the one that kind of started everything. So when you ask how you kind of started, so when I first put the very first one of these things together, I had one of these cheap plastic fly boxes. And it was, I think I bought it at Sportsman's Warehouse. And, these things are probably made by the tens of thousands, millions, probably molded somewhere in some other part of the world. And, you could find them, like I said, just about everywhere. And Welch's Fly Shop had one on sale, and they had these Richard Wheatley ones. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. Same exact fly box, same everything. And so I had a few of those, and that's the one that kind of started the company. And we sell, and they're actually probably one of the best selling ones we have because they're pretty inexpensive, and they're you don't have to buy a fly box and insert. They all come together, like that. And it's small. It'll fit in the chest pocket of most shirts, and it's really lightweight. It goes right in the front waiter pocket. So that one is and so the 2 that come complete are those 2 guys, the Wheatley one and then the plastic polypropylene one.
Very cool.
Those are the inserts. The other things we sell, the hats. You can look at my crazy bald head. We have some hats that have a little set of magnetic posts on them, and so they'll the flies will sit on those just like that.
So did you punch? Were you punching through bills of hats to put those in there? Yeah.
So we get the hats in, and then I just punch the holes in them, and the magnets stay right in there.
Very cool.
So that happens. And then the other one that we started getting into a few years ago. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with the kind of the rod building community in Southern Oregon, but you have RB Miser in Central Point. They're all in Central Point. You have RB Miser, Anderson Custom Rods, and Beulah are all kind of based out of Central Point, Medford area. And so I started working. One of the design engineer, one of my clients was actually RB Miser, and I started working with those guys on redesigning 2 things they had. Was the way they had a hand wrapper where they wrap all their rods. They do all their stuff by hand, and so and so they and started working with them and redesign their hand wrapper for them, and then on their lathe when they turned down and shaped their handles, redesigned a system that they could do that on. And so we have a line of products for for people who want to build their own fly rods. And so you can buy the hand wrappers, the same ones that Miser uses. The guy Richard Gere, who bought the Anderson custom rods from Gary Anderson, he uses those. So you can buy those from us. They're they're just a hand wrapper. They're not a power wrapper. And then the same the systems that they use for shaping the cork on the handles. We do those as well.
Very cool. Yeah, a little off topic, but like the Gary Anderson rods they're kind of like kind of legendary in Northern California here. I'm sure they are
For
up there
sure.
too. Yeah. And I knew it was winding down. I didn't hear that anybody bought the rod company. I didn't even hear that.
Yeah. So Gary sold the rod company to one of his employees named
Oh, way
Richard.
cool.
And so Charles, not Richard, Charles. So Charles bought that from him. So the company's still there. It's still, still operational. You can
Nice.
still buy Anderson custom rods. And then the other thing that a lot of people don't know is Bob Miser, sold his company last year to one of his employees, Nick Moses. Now, the truth of the matter is Nick has probably built every rod that's come out of Miser's shop in the last 10 years. So there's absolutely zero change on any of that. And so, I tell people, just give Nick a call, if you have a Miser rod, Nick probably built it. And if you want another one, he's going to build the next one too.
That's rad. They're staying kind of in the family like that. That's great to
hear.
Yeah.
It is cool.
My local shops, the two local shops here in town, were both selling what seemed like the last inventory, not too long ago. And I didn't get to pick one up. So I was kind of bummed out. But yeah, the Gary Anderson rods. Yeah.
Okay.
One of these days we'll get one of those.
Yeah. And if you come up, we'll get you over there. You can check out Charles' operation, check out Nick's operation. And I know Nick much better than Charles. And so
yeah, I was going to ask you about, because I saw, there's rod building stuff on your Instagram and some very tempting, reasonably priced rod building tools on your website too. And I was going to ask you who the rod builder was and if you put any of those up for sale. But are you the ones, you make rods too?
Yeah. But I don't sell them. I'll rework some for friends, and I'll do. I've got a couple friends in Montana who they'll pick up a bamboo rod, or they'll pick up a kit. But most of what I do, I either build my own or build them for friends or family.
That's cool. Yeah, I almost have bought kits a couple times in the past, like when they've been on sale from different places and stuff, and I just never pulled the trigger. But if I wanted to dip in and make a rod like the same scope as you, where it's like for yourself and maybe a friend or two every now and then, like what are the most important things to get started?
Well, obviously you need the components, the blank, the cork, the guides, thread, things like that.
Yeah.
So obviously the components, you need a blank, the thread, the guides, the cork, you need the cosmetic part of it. But then the simplest, when I started building them, I was actually using 2 books and some really crude thread tensioner, and a couple V blocks. You don't need anything fancy, but having a good hand wrapper really helps. And there's a whole host of them out there. The ones that we built for Miser and those guys, they have a very innovative thread tensioning system that uses magnets. So that's just kind of what we do. We do things with magnets. And so the thread tensioning system is actually a magnetic based tensioner. And then it made the ability to change out spools very quickly. The blank is held in the wrapping wheels, and then it has a couple of ties so you can let go of it and have it's kind of a hands-free system where if you need to answer the phone or let it sit, you don't have to worry about starting over or finishing the wrap. I tell people, if you can tie flies, you can build a fly rod. Fly tying is actually a lot harder. And it's not difficult at all. The handle is the one where I think kind of scares people the most. And you have 2 choices. You can have buy pre-made handles that are close to the length you like or the shape, and glue the whole handle on, or you have or you can glue them, do a layup with the different the cork rings, and then turn down and shape your own. And that's kind of the option that we always do, is we just shape our own, because most handles are shorter than what I tend to like. And and then you just have an entire cork handle, whereas if you lay up your own, you can add metal finishing details, you can use composite burl and porcelain, so you can do a lot more cosmetics with the handle. And that's kind of where the showing off part is. It's like knife makers, you see all these shows where people are making knives now, and then they get very elaborate with the handles and the scales and things like that. And so the cork and the composite is kind of the same thing. I mean, I'm always in awe at some of the stuff that Nick Moses turns out of that shop in Miser's shop. He's made handles. I've seen him make handles out of of elk horn and just super elaborate acrylic and just beautiful. It's like, damn, Nick, you've been holding out on me.
Yeah, that part actually seems kind of fun, like spinning the cork and like shaping it. Like it seems fun. Like if I had the equipment to do that, I think I'd be into it for sure.
Yeah, and none of it's really terribly expensive. You can buy a lathe that will turn any handle you want for, a few $100s from Harbor Freight. The wrappers we sell are a couple $100, and the systems for turning and shaping the handles, same thing, kind of a couple $100. So, all in, you can do it for less than you would build a rod, and you can buy kits. You can buy kits for a premium fly rod for anywhere between $400 and $600. You can spend a lot more if you get into really elaborate reel seats and things, but for the most part, you can end up with a $1,400 fly rod for $500 or $600.
One of these days I'm gonna do it, and then I'm gonna be jumping down another rabbit hole buying all kinds of stuff. When I was growing up, I had a friend whose dad had all that stuff in the garage. He wasn't a fly rod builder or anything like that. He was some kind of machinist. I can't remember what he did, but he had like lathes and all that stuff. We used to take like wooden skewers, and throw them in there and like sharpen them up and do all this crazy shit to them, and then like shoot them out of our pellet guns at targets and stuff. So if I can do that, I bet I could do a rod, man.
Yeah, you can. Like I said, if you can tie flies, you can build a fly rod. And I also tell people don't worry about making mistakes. I mean, you're not gonna, the only thing you can do to really kind of set you back a bunch of money is accidentally break the blank. And to do that, you'd have to do the same thing you would do on the river. You have to step on it. You have to slam it in a car door, or your door. And you're not going to do that building it. If something goes wrong, just cut the epoxy off, cut the threads off, and wrap it up again. A little bit of time.
That has been one of my apprehensions, because it doesn't seem like with tying a fly, you can toss something that you mess up too bad to salvage or whatever, and it's like whatever nominal cost, but like a rod feels like, oh man, did I just mess up $400, $500 or something?
It's just time. Yeah. You're not gonna mess it up. You're just gonna cost yourself time, exactly like a fly. If it doesn't turn out, you cut it off and put the hook back in the vise and start over.
Yeah.
And I was the same way. I was really apprehensive to do it. And funny story. Do you know the name Steve Godshall?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
So Steve Godshall is sort of we call him the mad scientist of the spay world. And so he works out of the shop at the Miser shop with Nick and Bob. And Steve designs the lines. When you buy a rod from those guys, you get a custom made line. Steve's a fly line designer. And he's done a lot of the design and engineering work on the rods, the blanks, the actions, what people are after. And Steve he taught hundreds and hundreds of people to build fly rods at the local clubs and some of the local schools. And so he's in the shop. And so when I built my first spay rod, I screwed up like the bottom handle. I was devastated. Like, man, this is going to cost me a bunch of money. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I took it to Steve. And the point of this story is, this is how I learned to don't worry about it. You can fix anything pretty easy. So I took it to Steve and I was like, man, can you help me fix this? And I kid you not, he grabbed, he's like, no problem, Rob. And he started chewing the cork off of that bottom handle, just, spitting in the trash can, and in about 5 minutes, he had that whole bottom handle stripped off with his teeth, just chewed it right off, stuck it in their lathe, pulled off, just straightened up some of the glue, laid up a new handle, and within a half a day it was done and we're back and running. And so
sometimes your teeth are the most efficient tool, man.
Well, and after that I was like, man, I was all worried about this, and this guy had this thing fixed at no time flat. And so at that point I'm like, you know what, like, as long as you don't break the blank, which is very hard to do, you can fix any of your mistakes.
I still haven't broken a rod yet. I watched my buddy. Yeah, I watched my buddy break one in his teeth not too long ago. Just like no pressure, and I've been lucky. Maybe I'm just careful.
Right. Yeah. No, you're careful. When I was in college, I went to college in Montana State University in Bozeman, and I paid for a few years of that, working as a fly fishing guide for about 3 years, and I'd have clients and. You tell them, don't do whatever. Don't leave them in the back of the truck near the tailgate, or don't put them in the car because you'll roll them up in the window. And sure enough, that happens every single time. And I've been guilty of doing it too.
You know, I lie. I did break one. I slipped and fell right before I was stepping into the water on Pluta Creek up here,
Okay.
and my rod slapped the water, and the tip broke. So that was my one casualty. I've definitely almost rolled them up in many a car window because I drive a Prius, and like I can fit a setup 13-foot rod. Like if I take my seat down and just the tip of it is out the side window, you know,
Right.
and I can have it all set up and get out of my car and ready to go. So I have come close, but nothing I cared about too much, just thankfully.
Yep, I've driven off with them like on the back of my truck. You know, I dinged up a nice loop classic reel one day.
Oh man.
Was driving off the boat ramp. I'm looking in the rearview mirror and I see the thing just bouncing off. Like, God, you know.
So do any of the fly boxes that you sell work for tube flies? I've been looking.
Actually, they do.
I've been on the hunt for a small pocket tube fly box.
So one of the ones we sell is a high 10. It's funny you should ask. You're the second person this week that's asked that. And
Yeah.
the question comes up every winter.
All right.
And
That
so
makes sense.
yeah, so we sell. So there's this high tenna box. They're actually pretty cool. They're made in Japan. They're nice and thin. They got this little clip on them. They're really durable. I mean, you can step on this and they don't break.
Yeah.
They're super durable. And so I have a handful of tubes and I didn't have
cool.
any good way to do it because I don't have anything magnetic on them. And so I found a supplier for these little plastic polyethylene tubes. They're about a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. And they fit down in this box. And so the box, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah,
It holds 9 of them in there. And then it just closes up. And so you can throw the tubes. And actually I have one that has some loaded in it. They're not tube flies, but they're mole leeches and intruders.
Yeah, cool.
And so the tube fits the fly and they just sit down in like this, like so.
Yeah, sweet. That's cool.
The other cool thing these guys do is they nest together. And so they've got these little tracks on the back of them. And so if I can get them to do it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so you can take a single-sided fly box and turn it into a two-sided fly box. And it's,
Yeah.
it's only about 1 inch thick.
My listeners can't see this, but it is super cool. Let me tell you. You guys can't see it, but they basically just slide together and you can connect the two boxes on top of each other, which is cool. I dig that.
Right. Yeah, and you can check. I mean, we got, a lot of pictures of this stuff. These are on the website, but yeah, the tubes just fit in. They hold 9. I'd like the anal retentive engineer in me is like, man, why couldn't it just be 10? Not, it's just a weird number, but that just happened to be how the math worked out. But it was, surprising. I was like, all right, that's great.
Yeah, that is plenty for a quick fish mission.
Oh,
yeah. Like I tend to take like 3 to 5, maybe,
right.
If I go down for a couple hours, and I usually will just fish 1 or 2,
Yep. I tell people if you lose in 9 flies, you're fishing way too deep. You need to dial back the tip a little bit.
So who ties the flies that you have for sale in your store?
I tie some of them, and I have a commercial tire actually out of Kenya that does the bulk of them for me. So
wow, cool.
What we do most of the patterns, and then we'll send them over there, and they do a good job. So we've been working with them for a couple of years now.
You send them a little video on how you're doing it and some instructions and
the pattern and the instructions. They understand. That was always a learning process for everybody because like when you learn to tie flies, the kind of the first progression is just learn some basic techniques, hackling or tying on a wing or whatever it happens to be, and then once you learn how to do different things, whether you're applying dubbing or putting on a rib, then you start looking at other people's flies and you start realizing that it's not all the same. It becomes a true art form, and people kind of pick up a unique style. And for me, one of the people I get most of my inspiration on and learning the most about this stuff is Marty Howard.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned from Marty very quickly is about for steelhead flies is proportions. Proportions are really important, and I'm a stickler for it with my own flies. And so working with these guys, when I first stumbled across them, it's like, well, send me some green butt skunks or send me some pattern. Let me see what they are. And while they're functional, they fish well. The proportions were not, kind of in my opinion, were not correct. And so we've been working with them on proportions and send them diagrams and kind of explain, how far the tail needs to go back, relative to the bend of the hook, how far your hackle should come back relative to the point, and so there are some certain things that you see that, you can look at flies tied by different people and understand, this guy understands, this tire understands proportions, some of the other ones don't. So, it's a process, but yeah, you send them videos or a recipe or even pictures. And I've even gotten to the point where I'll send them, I'll tie up like 3 samples and send it to them, along with with the hooks and things like that.
Oh yeah, and they'll just back engineer and figure it out. And
yeah, because they know the techniques. I mean, they're awesome fly tires. So they they know how to put on dubbing. They know how to tie in a wing. They know how to keep a head small and tidy. So they know the techniques, and then it's just a matter of like here's 3 examples of this particular fly that I want you guys to to work on.
With the full blessing of the estate of Macho Man Randy Savage, we are proud to present a new line of beef-style, handheld, edible meat tubes. That's right, the beloved Slim Jim Company is back, and we've got the rights to the likeness of Macho Man Randy Savage to use to promote our fine, greasy products. Isn't that right, Randy?
Oh yeah, I love me some beef sticks. Slim Jim, baby. Oh yeah.
You said a mouthful, Randy. Thanks for your wholehearted and legally binding endorsement of Slim Jim brand beef-flavored food product, exclusively available at Ace Hardware and Regal Cinemas. Cool, man. Yeah, I mean, the proportions thing is what gets me kind of every time. If I'm not happy with what I tie, that's usually the problem, and it's usually an extreme of either side. Like I tied up one last night that was way too sparse, and it's usually the opposite for me. I usually put way too much material in there, and now when I'm watching videos of people tying, I like to watch like multiple videos of the same pattern by different people. And I like to see like what they do and they all explain it a little different why they're tying it too. And like certain ones will click for me, and certain ones, they just kind of go in one ear out the other. And I tend to look for those little details now. Like I might have tied a bunch of clousers before, but even when I get ready to tie them, I'll look at a couple videos and see and I'll notice little things, like little subtle things that are definitely important for the end product, and it's tough. I was just talking to another guest of mine, had Joel Hill on not too long ago, and he was, I learned from him that he would actually like mark his tube with a Sharpie to show like where different proportions are starting and ending and stuff. That
smart.
Was just a little tiny tip that I think is awesome, that I didn't ever hear before I talked to him. So
and tips are picking up tips from people. That's the other thing. As you do more, as you tie more, you learn. Like you watch all these fly time videos, and 90% of the time it's all kind of the same thing. But then every once in a while you pick up a tip on them. And one of the people who I've got some great tips from, and I think he's done podcasts too, is Jonathan Farmer. My son. Yep. Jonathan's another one that I get a lot of inspiration from, because
me too, man. Yeah,
he's
me too.
An excellent fly tire, and he's got some killer tips on like, all right, that's a good one, and kind of carry that forward. And
he's really the only guy I've taken like a legit lesson from, and I learned so much. And even just watching him, he posts a lot of videos, whether it's him tying or just his bugs and stuff. And I've ordered a bunch before I got to know him, and still have a bunch of flies of his that haven't fished, just because I've started tying my own stuff, and I like to keep his nice in this box I have. But I'll watch the same, like I've seen Jim Sen's hobo spay video like 20 times. I tie a bunch of those, and I feel like I catch little tiny things every time. Maybe it's just my shitty attention span.
Right.
I don't know, but I miss stuff. I'll watch them again.
Yeah, it's easy. It's super easy to miss stuff. Because and a lot of times I think they're tips, they're things these guys do that they've been doing it for so long, they don't even think to stop. I'm like, okay, here's a tip, right? And so I like to go to these like fly tying events. Like there's the Northwest Fly Tire Expo coming up here in about a month and a half up in Albany, and so we put up a booth at that one, and that's a great one to go see. Just some fantastic tires. And then we do the Wasatch Fly Tying event in Utah, and that one will be in April this year. And so, just getting a chance to sit down and watch some of these guys, and you pick up just some great little techniques and some interesting tricks watching them.
Yeah. What do I do? Would it be ridiculous for me to take my podcast to a show to get a booth?
I
And
don't
like,
think
you
so.
know, I've thought about that a
You
couple times, because I talk to folks like you and that go to do these shows and stuff, and I go to them, and I feel like I don't know if I'd have enough reason. Like I don't know if I just like I like preparing for my interviews. I'm not like, I don't know what would happen if I was just talking to people off the cuff and if it would be interesting or not, or if I do
right.
any live interviewing in a venue like that or not. I mean, I don't know.
The
Probably
one
be
thing
good for networking either way, huh?
yeah, it might be. The one thing I've seen a few times is, there's a two or three, every event there are like two or three people that come over and like, hey, we do a video of you. Yeah, no problem. Okay. And then, what ends up happening is, they send you a link back is like, hey, here's the video, if you want it, if you want it to air, here's the invoice. I'm like, well, that's not kind of what we talked about. And so there's a few of those you got to watch. And I think the bummer is that, there's enough of those that people kind of get turned off by. Like, hey, man, this isn't a prep, we're not going to send you an invoice. We don't want you to pay for anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the one.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, not the route for this show, really. This is just me meeting folks and talking crap,
Yeah.
Speaking of Jonathan Farmer, I think I might have been I interviewed him for this season too, so I've interviewed him twice now, and
Oh, cool.
I can't remember which interview it was, but he told me a story about how he hates chenille. And it turned into like a kind of running joke with a friend of his where he was tying stuff with chenille to like show him, and is there anything any materials you hate like that you just refuse to use or hate to use?
That's an interesting question.
Or the other side too. Anything you've been using a lot lately that you like, or something new that you've been using?
Well, what I really would like to find is, and it's along the line of chenille. So I'm not a huge fan of chenille. I got a couple of flies like the comeback brindle. It's got a chenille body, just basic simple fly, and it accounts for 80% of the fish I catch on the Rogue River. It's just a really simple, easy to tie fly. What I've been looking for, so that back to the fly tires that I have is so one of the biggest problems I get, and when you get a batch of flies, are they're always overdubbed. And part of me is like, man, I'm just going to send them chenille and have the bodies done in chenille. But I'm kind of like Jonathan. I like it for some patterns, but hate it for others. And what I would really love to see is some sort of a material that commercial tires can wrap on a shank like chenille, but when it's done, it looks like a properly dubbed body, not overly dubbed, not too heavy, because a lot of times what happens is they end up, overdubbed. It's just too heavy. But I have looked, far and wide for something like that, and it's either, like really long, and so it's not, it's not really what you want, or it's like really like stiff, and so it kind of, looks like, like little cactus.
You're gonna start spinning up your own brushes here pretty soon, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and even doing that, like, because a lot of times I don't usually, I don't twist dubbing on, I just throw it in a dubbing loop and then.
Yeah, I tend to do that too. I'm not, I don't know if I'm just not good at it, but it tends to stick in there better, and just like stay put. Yeah. So I do the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it gives you a lot more control, and you can control how tightly you twist it and how much is in there. And so it's a quick way to make that, but I'd love it to, when you're tying your own flies, that's fine. It's easy to do, but, I'd love to be able to find something where I could just, send spools of that to the commercial tires. Here's what I want, because then I know they're all going to be exactly the same.
Yeah. I see a lot of people complain about like patterns that have too many dubbing loops in them, or whatever, like, and it's a pain in the butt. I don't really care. I kind of like that. It was one of the first things I saw somebody do tying that I was like, oh man, that's rad. Like, what the hell did they just do? They just spun that up and it, now it looks perfect on. Anyway, I don't really mind it, but I also just kind of jumped onto the EP brush train, and now I want like every color, and like, man, I love them. They're super sweet. It's super durable and like just quick and easy. And yeah, I mean, that seems like the route that you'd have to take,
There, on the subject of dubbing, there is one dubbing that that Jonathan turned me on to. Actually, it's just a package dubbing. It's got these little bits of rubber leg in it.
Oh, it's the Kraken. Super
Yeah,
Kraken.
yep,
Yeah.
that stuff. I love that stuff, especially, if you, and I like to use it, I use it kind of as the gill on muddler minnows. Like, I mean, because it just a little bit of it, and then you can pick it out, and it just makes a great gill on those in a muddler minnow. Fantastic.
I just got every color of the regular Kraken. I can't remember either Super Kraken or regular Kraken because I love it too. I only had like 5 different colors. Now I got them all. Got the sampler pack or whatever.
Yep, I love that stuff. And then, just the other one is I'm a sucker for like really nice quality, like pheasant, pheasant rump, because it's just such a nice, long, flowing hackle. It's easy to tie with. It's pretty forgiving. Finding some of that is always exciting. And then, just stuff that you don't see very often. I don't have a lot of expensive material. I'll buy a good jungle cock cape every few years, and then the nails run out, and and I got tired of looking at, you have this cape you spent $120 on, and you picked all the nails off it, but then it has all these feathers out the back of it, and so I started tying those into a wing, and I love them. I mean, they're just a great wing. You tie them in kind of like a D style, but they make a wonderful wing. So I was happy about, find a use for that. Those feathers that usually end up, never getting used.
I was joking with Jonathan last time I talked to him about me starting a jungle cock coop here in Northern California.
They're mean, man.
So I don't know.
So there's a Siskiyou aviary they're based out of kind of near Ashland. Her name is Kate Davison. She did the bookkeeping for Miser Shop, and she had a bunch of birds that she raised. And
was she selling them for fly tying and stuff too, or?
Yeah, she's kind of backed out of it, I think, because she ended up with a bird allergy. So she, it's kind of past that. But for a while there, and this is a secondhand story, and I have to, verify how true this is. But I think she was raising jungle cock for a while.
Oh yeah.
And the word of caution is they are mean as hell. And so like you'd go in there and like, full on protective gear, because they don't screw around. They're going to come after you. So
chicken's got to be mean if you got to survive in the jungle, man.
I think these are extra mean. And so, but yeah, if you've got a coop and the ability to do it, I've tried to convince my wife. I'm like, well, let's raise chickens. We'll throw some jungle cock in there. And she's like, I'm not doing that. They're mean.
Yeah. I've also seen people raising the button quail, which seem to have some feathers that resemble those nails pretty close. Okay, I mean, I've never tied with them or anything, so I can't say for sure, but I've seen them on the internet. I'm like, well, that looks pretty dang close to a jungle cock nail. And there's a lot of people that I've, come across online that are, raising quail for whatever, for all the different reasons, eggs, whatever.
Eggs and meat and
But I don't ever see anybody tying with them, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they wouldn't work.
I don't know. I mean, when I met my wife, I lived in Tri-Cities, Washington for a few years, right out of college. We lived in Tri-Cities, and that's where I met her. And it was one of those times in my life where it's kind of missed opportunities, where I hadn't really learned anything about steelhead, didn't have any interest in them, and was still very much a trout fisherman coming from Montana. And so he spent a lot of time on the Yakima River fishing for trout. But I had a whole bunch of friends who were bird hunters, and they fish for chuckers up there, and always, they always had chuckers, and I look back now like, man, I could have had some great feathers out of those chuckers.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah.
But just never did. Yeah. Lived in Montana, like my bird hunter friends, Hungarian partridge. They fortunately they're still there, and so if I want Hun skins, I can still get skins on Huns. So that was always nice.
Cool. So, I meant to ask you this earlier in the interview, but what made you kind of focus your business on the two-hand fishing game?
That's a good question. Because here in Southern Oregon, on the Rogue, there's really not a good trout fishery. And so it's mainly steelhead, mainly, salmon. There are a few resident trout here and there, and we get some cutthroat and stuff, but it's not, man, it was a tough learning curve. Coming here and approaching it like you're a trout fisherman. And, so the first thing is like we'd be on the river, fishing in my drift boat, and you'd see these big March browns coming off and nothing eating them. I'm like, what the hell? And then, they just were not dry flies. And so, and eventually I kind of figured out that, this is a steelhead river, and they're, while they're similar to trout, they're very much a different animal. And, of course, I mentioned that I was a fly fishing guide in college. And so, and fairly young when we moved here. And so I still probably, overly egotistical, well, I was a guide. I don't need, how hard can it be to catch these fish? And, and you have those days where you have a nymph and an indicator, and you catch like 6 steelhead in an hour. It's like, yeah, they're like trout. That's easy.
Yeah.
And, eventually those days are few and far between, and you kind of figure out, pretty fast that they're not like trout. And like all these old timers that are trying to tell you, offer advice along the way, you probably should have listened to them. And so, focusing on with two-hand hardware is really because, I think in about 2008, a good friend of mine, we were fishing the Klickitat with single handers, and he had a bunch of two-hand rods he didn't want, he never used. And he's like, oh, just, pick one, take one, learn to use it. And I did, and I loved it. I mean, I loved the elegance and the simplicity of it. And, I kind of never looked back. And so where we are, and the product we know is focus on more of the two-hand game. Understanding it's a niche.
Yeah.
So the fly boxes, we have some smaller ones that can still be used for trout, and everything applies to trout. And you see a lot more trout spay now as well, and so I think that's kind of exciting for me. But it's just being here on the Rogue River. We don't have a lot of trout. I mean, they're here about the only time of year we'll break out the single hand rods is when the salmon fly hatch comes off. That can be a lot of fun. But even there, when it starts to wind down, that's, you can almost every year be guaranteed you'll hit your first steelhead on, skating this salmon fly pattern almost every year. So it's like, it's fun to catch, a whole bunch of, little, 14-inch fish, but, the single hand gets put back in the boat pretty quick when it's like, all right, it's time to start skating some dries for these summers that I know are hiding in here, the early arrivals.
So what's your typical setup then on the water for winter steelhead up there? Like what kind of, like what size rod, or what line do you like? What do you do?
So I'm kind of an oddball. So I will fish a 6 to 7 weight 14-foot rod pretty much all year long. I like mid-belly lines, so I fish a 54-foot gale force equalizer on an RB Miser 14-foot 6.7 MKX. And I will fish that either with just a dry line floating leader, or like a light 3-inch per second Versa leader, as long as the conditions allow. And so it as long as, if the river is clear and decent level, under 1500 CFS, 2000 CFS, you can catch steelhead on the Rogue River all year long with that setup. Now, once the river blows up, I'll go to same rod, or I'll bump it up to like a 7 or an 8 weight, still 14-foot, and then go to a heavier, kind of your Skagit T8 setup. I figure if I'm gonna fish a Skagit line, it's they're designed to cast big flies, big heads, get stuff down deep. And so when the conditions allow, the river blows up, it starts falling into that steelhead green, the flows are high, then I'll go to like, I like those real game changers where you have a multi-density head and, just a T8, and whatever fly on it that you feel confident with, because it's, those integrated lines, whether it's like the Fist or the multi-densities, whether it's the Fist or the Game Changer, those lines, cast just as well as the floating, and they run deep fast. I mean, you can get much deeper with a multi-density line in T8 than you'll ever get with a floating line and like T11, T14, because you only have 10 feet of head or 10 feet of tip. Whereas when you end up with these multi-density lines, you have like 5 feet of floating and the rest of it sinks. And so they do the job and get down well. But given my choice, I will, fish a mid-belly and a floating line all year long. I love it.
Sweet. Yeah, you call yourself an oddball, man. I like the oddballs, and I like that you kind of, found your niche, Like that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast. There's a lot of fly fishing podcasts, and I kind of went towards the fly tying angle, which isn't the most, it's more of a visual thing usually, but it's just talking to folks and meeting them and making jokes and stuff on my dumb shows. So, I like it, find what you like and do what you do, man.
Yeah, it's and the other thing I've learned out here is that it's kind of what I mentioned earlier. You're gonna have these missed opportunities in life. When I moved here, there were a couple old timers. There's a shop called the Silver Sedge in Merlin, and there's this old guy that worked at that shop, and it was in kind of a dirty little place. And I walked in there, and it was a mess. I'm like, good God, this is not a fly shop. I was used to these fancy fly shops in Bozeman, Montana, right? And but he gave me, I was with my oldest daughter at the time, and he gave me this brindle bug, right? And like, I looked at this thing like that. Okay, thanks, whatever. And I put it in my fly box, and it stayed there for years. A long time, 10 years probably, maybe no more, longer than that. But it stayed there for at least 10 years. And and that shop is long since gone, which is too bad. In hindsight, I wish that shop was still around. But there came a time when some years, probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe more now, where it was just a tough year. I could not buy a steelhead, and I was still in like the big intruder Skagit, T11, T14 game, operating on the principle that, man, if you're not in the rocks, you're not fishing properly. And it just, we're in the September, that's prime time on the Road River, and there's, not a fish to be had. And I was fishing a run down the way, and, nothing was working. And so, I opened up my box, and this brindle bug that this old guy gave me, just staring at me.
Finally.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, well, I'll just give this thing a try. And, and I took that sink tip off and put on just I had like some tapered lead, just some mono leader, a 2X or 3X or whatever. It's all I had. And, in 3 casts in, I hooked up with just one of the most beautiful steelhead I've ever seen. Fish in that little brindle bug, probably not even 3 inches below the surface of the water. And, I thought, well, that's got to be a fluke. And, turned the fish loose, and, took a few more steps, and about 3 more casts, got another one. And the same exact thing, same fly. And so ever since that day, I've been sold. I'm like, everybody's always told me you don't need to fish deep. You don't need to fish deep. And that is absolutely true. And when and when you start seeing fish, chase skated flies across the river, like, they're on a mission to just crush it. Like, yeah, you don't need to be fishing in the rocks. I mean, there are times in the winter for sure. You mentioned the winter where you're going to have to get down on them when the water cools off and it's off color. But, here our fish are travelers too. The other thing that I've learned is that, winter fish, again, you don't have to be deep, because a lot of times the mistake people make on the Rogue is they step out into that run, they get about mid-thigh, and they're, 10 feet off the bank, or, 12 feet off the bank. And what's happening is the river's up, and those winter fish are travelers, and they're going right between that guy and the bank.
You're right behind him. Yeah.
And I've been guilty of that too. I mean, the first time I saw that happen, I was like, man, all right, the old timers are right. These, fish, foot or two of water. Don't even walk out into it. Just fish that traveling lane on the winter fish.
Yeah.
So
I try to keep that in mind every time I step in the river, and I always feel like most of the time I half-ass it. Like I'll give it like 2 or 3 up close, real quick, and then I'll get out in the run and start doing what I want to do. So, but I just was walking my daughter through the fish hatchery here for a field trip with her class, and they were talking about the lanes that these fish travel to, and they said the same shit. When they're going up to spawn, the salmon are coming up, or steelhead are coming up. Super true. I mean, I don't see them, but they're probably going right behind me, So.
Yeah, especially winter fish. I mean, they really are. And, the mistake that I see people make, and I've been guilty of it a long time until you learn the hard way, you hook a fish and you lose it, is like in the summertime, cast short. I mean, really short, because a lot of times, and don't walk out into the run. I mean, a lot of times those fish are sitting like right at the head of a riffle or something, and most people walk right up to about where those fish would be sitting, and then they cast. They want to. You have the two-handed rod. You feel like a Superman. You want to cast. 8 feet out there, and they cast right over probably 5 fish that are sitting in the head of that riffle.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
good sound advice there.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
So how can someone get their local fly shop to carry your stuff? Like what can they do?
I am in the process, actually. So this year is going to be our year to start expanding in the shops. We got stuff in a couple places. So Poppy at the Red Shed Fly Shop up in Peck, Idaho, he carries our stuff. And then Will at the Ashland Fly Shop, he carries it as well. This year we've redesigned the packaging so that it actually can be presented in shops. And so this year we're going to start expanding out into shops. And so
very cool.
We'll focus on Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and maybe Utah, because we got some good connections in Utah for sure.
Nice. Very cool, man. Yeah. I've always heard about Poppy. Like comes to his little red fly shop, because you come up in internet searches all the time.
Yeah.
It seems like a magical place.
It is.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, I mean, I don't know how it happened, but here you have a retired truck driver that bought a little place in Peck, Idaho, and started a fly shop literally in a red shed on his property.
Yeah.
And from that has kind of become the grandfather of Spay. The Clearwater Spay Clave, the Red Shed Spay Clave, they had it. The first time I had been to it was this year. It had been the first time they'd had it in a number of years. COVID, shut them down, and then Poppy's wife had passed away, and so they, the year before, and so it had been on hiatus for 3 or 4 years. And here you have a place in the middle of nowhere, operating out of a shop that is literally a fly shop out of a red shed, and you have some of the best fly casters and fly fishermen in the world that come to this thing. It's unreal. I mean, the Clearwater River is a fantastic draw, and it's the right time of year, but I was like, this is amazing. It's awesome. And he's just this super nice, humble guy. You sit down and talk to him all day long.
Like, cool.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, get Poppy on the podcast.
Yeah, I should. Yeah,
super interesting.
Cool. Yeah.
And if you can pull it off, that Clearwater Clave would be a great time to do it. Just go up there and have an interview with him in the shop, him and Dale. Because he's another one that's kind of stepping away. It's and he's handing it off to one of his employees, Dale. And yeah, the Red Shed is a fantastic place. That's kind of how I got turned on to Gale Force fly lines, and just a neat guy.
Yeah, I don't know why I hadn't put him on my list yet, but I just did as you were talking to me. So he's on my list.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. You should.
Right on, man. Yeah, I got also the Ashland Fly Shop has like maybe my favorite online store. It's like, as far as like, ease of use, user experience, and just like the products too. Like I order from the Ashland Fly Shop pretty often, different materials and
they're
stuff.
close
It's
to you,
great.
so you probably get it right away.
Yeah, pretty quick too.
Yep.
But my local shop just closed, Keeney's, which was 10 minutes down the street from me, and it's a bummer. I mean, we got another fly shop, another great fly shop here, Fly Fishing Specialties. It's just a little further down the highway.
Okay.
And so when I get lazy and I don't want to go, I order, and it's typically from Ashland Fly Shop. They have tons of good stuff. Yeah.
So the cool thing about Poppy, and one of the things that sets him aside, is, as a fly fisherman, especially a Spay person, fly lines. So you get a new rod, and then you got to do the whole, well, what line am I going to put on? I got to dial this thing in. Poppy will, if he carries the line, he'll send it to you at no cost. And if you like it, he just says, well, just pay me online once you get it, right? So but you can try out a number of fly lines, and it's not going to cost you, $60 to $100 for every one you buy.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, just send it back and pay for the shipping.
That's super cool. Yeah, my shop would do that. Would let you take a line down to the river and check it out. And if you didn't like it, bring it back. But mail order is a whole nother story. That's a lot of trust, and that's rad.
Yeah. He's a super trusting guy. I mean, and ship from for me to ship to Peck, Idaho, like a fly line, like $5. It's probably the same for you. Just put it in a padded envelope and off you go.
Totally. All right, I got two more questions for you, man. Since
Yeah.
since you're talking your home water, the Rogue, what are 5 flies you think people should always have in their box for the Rogue?
That's easy. So all again, and this goes back to I'm a traditional pattern guy. So I would say a brindlebug, a red ant, green butt skunk, a silver Hilton or a green butt silver Hilton, and then uh, some sort of surface fly, a skater. Todd Hirano, do you know who Todd Hirano is?
I don't know.
Okay, so Todd Hirano, look up a fly called the little wang, or just do an Instagram search or a Google search for Todd Hirano. He lives up in Springfield. Another guy you might want to talk to. Great guy, super humble, a dedicated surface fly fisherman only. And so Todd is a long rod fisherman, and he will fish a surface fly all year long, no matter what the conditions are.
Right on.
And he is damn good at it.
Yeah.
And so some sort of a surface fly. I like Todd Hirano's Little Wing, Biviz, Bomber, or, and then of course, or a muddler minnow, swap out any one of those for a muddler. Because you can never go wrong on this river with a muddler all year long. And I've caught fish in the winter on muddlers. I've, caught them, whenever. So that's, so the Rogue, you'll do pretty well on any of those.
Sweet. I haven't done a Rogue River episode yet. I'm gonna have to do that too and really dig into that. And,
yeah.
I mean, there's so many awesome Pacific Northwest steelhead rivers. I'm gonna hit them all eventually and talk about them on the show. So my last question for you, not related to anything fly tying or fly fishing or anything, but have you ever had a paranormal or supernatural experience or anything like that? Anything weird?
That is an interesting question. I would have to think about that. Not really. My wife is pretty into that stuff, and we talk about it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, a little more skeptical.
Yeah, a little more skeptical, but every once in a while, I get, you just kind of get an indicator that, there's somebody looking out for you, or, or just, some things that just don't quite add up. I can't put my finger on it right now.
Yeah, a synchronicity.
Yeah, I have to think about it, because there was something that recently happened that I couldn't really, write it off as, well, I don't know what that was. It's the engineer in me that's real skeptical of it. Like, yeah, I don't know. All this stuff's pretty explained. I mean, the things that have intrigued me lately, and it's not my own paranormal experience, but all of the video you see coming out right now of all of the UFO stuff,
it's a high time for that right now.
Yeah. I mean, these are things you just can't explain. I mean, so
what's funny is, I've been reading about UFOs for probably 20 years now. Like, I've been very into the topic, and I'm like sick of seeing UFO videos. Like, I'm just like, enough lights.
Right.
I'm like, enough lights, because it's like they're all over the place right now. Like, it's like, if you want to look at UFO videos, like, now's the time. There's plenty out there, whether they're real or what, you got to make your own judgment on it or whatever. And there's also the ones that, are supposedly completely confirmed real, that the government put out, or were in the New York Times,
Right.
But yeah, that's, probably never been a better, hotter time for that topic.
No.
It's hard. It's funny to me when people aren't interested in that one right now, because it's like, it's right there in front of all of us right now. And whether you're skeptical about what it is or whatever, that's one thing. But like, if you have any interest in like who we are, where we came from, like all the big picture, like existential questions, like that's an interesting topic right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't. Like I said, there's something recently that got me, that I couldn't really explain, but right now it's escaping me. I can't think of what it is.
That's okay, man. I don't get a lot of stories, but I ask the question every time.
Yep, I've got a really good fishing friend that comes out every year from Maine. He's retired. He comes out from and he's a big Bigfoot believer. He hasn't seen one, but he's interesting. He's not a kind of guy who's like, yeah, Bigfoot's real. It's just a matter of time. He wants to believe it, but he's sort of like, every time there's some sort of a sighting, it turns out to be a hoax. Never seen anything to make him believe that it's true, but wants to believe it's true.
Yeah, I feel the same about Bigfoot, I think.
Yeah.
I Yeah, I want it to be real, I guess. I want the phenomenon to be real. There's maybe not a more hoaxed thing, like as far as that realm goes, like the Bigfoot hoax is it's the hoaxes of all hoaxes. In the Patterson film, like the famous Northern California film is like the one that's like kind of hard to debunk. Like after all these years, like it's like been slowed down and sharpened and shit, and like it's hard to deny that one. That one looks pretty good, and a lot of what video experts and stuff have said that it's, you know, there's nothing funny going on unless it's somebody in a really good costume or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I tend to lean on the, because my thing with Bigfoot, not to go on a totally weird tangent here, but like the no bones and no body thing is like, you know, even the animals that we don't see often, we end up finding bones and bodies eventually, right? And like, you know, the people that are really into Bigfoot will tell you that they bury their own dead or whatever. Like they're like, you know, but still, you'd still find something to me. So I tend to lean on something way weirder, that it's like some sort of, you know, supernatural event. It's a, you know, what some people call like the trickster phenomenon or whatever, where it's like, it's just kind of there for you. It's a, you know, an experience that is kind of tailored for you and whatever's happening at the time, and you're not going to find a real body or a missing link or something like that, or some ape, you know, that's out there. That's how I feel, but I tend to side with your buddy. It's about the same opinion.
Yeah, I think I with Bigfoot I kind of lean the same way with you. So like, yeah, you know, everybody nowadays has a cell phone with a super high res camera on it.
Yeah.
And every time there's a Bigfoot sighting, how can you not have a picture of it? So, because everybody has a cell phone. I mean, you know, they give them away for free.
Well, they say the same thing about UFOs, and now there's a million UFO videos out there.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then you have animals where you have like, you know, 500 of them left in the whole world, like, you know, these super rare snow leopards. And, you know, we end up with video of those.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
You know, if you can find video of those, you know, somebody's bound to, you know, if Bigfoot was real, somebody would surely have a video of the thing somewhere that's not grainy, you know, from the 1960 whatever.
Yeah, no, the Patterson guy got one. He's the one guy that got it.
Right. Yeah, not 1 cent. So that's kind of the weird thing for it.
Well, Rob, it's been a pleasure, man.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure getting to know you and getting to learn about how your business got started. I urge everybody to check out your website. I'll link to it in the show notes and stuff, and grab a fly box or whatever you like on there, whatever anybody sees. It's all rad stuff, man. And you know, I'm gonna get up to Oregon again soon here, and you're in Grants Pass, which isn't that far from me. So I'm gonna
No, it's really close.
Whether I'm stopping there or I'm on the way through up north, I'm gonna hit you up and grab a beer with you. And
yeah, for sure. We got great breweries here. And any of the listeners, like if they, you know, have questions, just call me. My phone number's on the website, and you know, or send me a message if you're coming through looking for a place to fish. If I have the time, I'll get out with you and kind of point you in the right direction. And if not, I'll tell you where to go.
Sweet. So, that's how I found you. You posted I've been following you for a while, but you posted your business card one day on Instagram. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, there's his email. I'm going to hit him up for an interview.
Yeah, just send me an email or give me a call. Yeah, like I said, the phone's always on. You know, I may not answer it depending on the time of day, but yeah, you know, it's always there.
Right on, man. Well, best of luck to you and your family in 2024, and you know, we'll be in touch.
You got it. Thanks, man.
Take it easy, buddy.
All right, take care.
Bye. There's a lesson in that interview. The old saying goes, when life gives you lemons, you got to cut yourself real deep and squeeze the lemon into that cut and then scream at the world that it can never hurt you. That isn't how the saying goes. You're supposed to make a tall glass of lemonade out of those lemons, or even better, mix it half and half with iced tea and enjoy the world's best beverage in Arnold Palmer.
I've had a big glass of iced tea and I shared a little lemonade on it and mixed it up, and wow, was it good. Well, a lady at a table heard me do that.
Or like Rob, you make a fly fishing company out of a giant pile of magnets that you have. Go with the flow. Roll with the punches. Be creative. Take a risk. People that venture out to do things on their own like Rob will always inspire me. I don't care if it's a musician trying to write songs and make it in the biz, or someone who opens up a restaurant, or an author trying to get a book published. It's all rad to me. I grew up watching my dad be a one-man business running a Volvo repair shop and literally doing everything himself. It takes real guts to put yourself out there and risk your livelihood on something that you believe in. Plus, working for people and being told what to do usually sucks. Who likes rules? Not me.
Fuck you. I don't have any rules, so don't invite me to game night.
I can't help but feel like we'd all be happier in general if we were fully in charge of our own fate like that. Anyways, big props to Rob for all that he does for Two Hand Hardware Company and everyone else out there trying to make shit happen on their own accord. It's what I'm doing with this highly successful and extremely lucrative broadcasting career after all. Thanks again for coming on the show, Rob. It was my pleasure to have you on as a guest. And, as always, thank you all for listening. We are officially at the halfway point of Season 3, and I'm cooking up another chunk of episodes. Up next is an episode on my home water, the American River, with local guru Andy Gibbard. And I believe it's Andy's first podcast interview ever, which I always love. Andy gave me my first casting lesson with a two-handed rod, and he's been a huge help ever since I went into my now-closed local shop and got my first fly rod back in 2013. A 9-foot 6-weight TFO Lefty Cray model that I still fish and will never get rid of. Am I in the minority of fly anglers that have never owned a 9-foot 5-weight rod? Anyways, we talk about our little metro river that used to be a destination for wild steelhead and salmon but doesn't have that many fish anymore. And we talk about the closing of Keeney's Fly Shop where Andy worked for 30 years, his guide service, and his fly, Andy's You Name It. After that, my buddy, the former Bass Pro bathroom attendant known on Instagram as Luchador Flyco, is coming on the program, which I've been looking forward to. He is a great Instagram follow, and he reposts stuff that crack me up daily. He was at one point part of the Honey Hole angling crew out of the San Antonio area that were my guests on episode 15 about the Guadalupe River, but he wasn't able to make that interview. I'm happy to finally get him in the guest chair and talk flies and probably barbecue and a bunch of other stuff. So stay tuned. Got another half dozen episodes coming at you before I go back into hibernation. I'll wrap this up by continuing the trend of ending each show with some content recommendations. Here's a couple that are a little selfish. For some reason, I always feel stupid about telling other people about bands that I play in, but this first little plug is for my band, Stella Crest. It's a band I currently play in with my little brother and two of our closest buddies. I've played in a lot of bands, but this is the best one if you ask me. And you should ask me because I am in the band. My baby brother started Stella Crest in Seattle, but he eventually moved back home to the Sacramento area and convinced me to get off my 43-year-old ass and start writing and performing original tunes again. I'll tell you right now that joining a band at my age made me feel like a clown, but I quickly realized that it's just something that I have to do. I took 10 years off, and coming back to it with a totally different scope and expectation has been really rewarding. By the time this episode comes out, we might have recorded a new album, as we're putting the finishing touches on it right now. But there are 2 albums that are already available on streaming services if you care to give them a listen. We are not at all trying to make it anymore. That train left the station a long time ago. We are writing music that we enjoy though without any expectations and having a great time doing it. If you like Interpol or Shiner or kind of dark heavy melodic stuff like that, you might like Stella Crest. I've used some of our songs as background music for past episodes, and my brother who sings in the band has written original music that I've used on the show as well. Next up is Worm Tutorial. You know the Worm. He's the marketing director for this podcast and an associate producer too. There's a good chance there wouldn't be a Secret Society of Fly Tires podcast without the Worm. He doesn't fish either. He may have never once been fishing in his life, but he has encouraged me and been a creative partner of mine this whole time. Long ago, I helped encourage him to put together what has become Worm Tutorial. We used to work together at the same office, and during our downtime, we found new ways to make each other cry laughing at the dumbest stuff, and that time resulted in the cult sensation that is Worm Tutorial and this very podcast. The Worm posts a new tutorial on his social media channels every week. He's got hundreds of them now, maybe even more than 1,000. Follow him on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or wherever you want. Support him on Patreon. He also has a store with a bunch of great t-shirts. I'm looking at his store right now and he has one that says, "Normalize Girls Farting," and there's another one that says, "I've never listened to music and I never will." I'm sure he has the t-shirt just for you. There would be no fake advertisements on this show without him, and I'm forever grateful to call him a friend and collaborator.
This episode of The Secret Society of Fly Tires is brought to you by The Secret Society of Fly Tires, the only podcast that is this podcast. We couldn't find any sponsors who were ready, willing, and wet for this episode, so we had to bite the bullet and sponsor it ourselves. Oh well, do what you gotta do, am I right? Am I right? I don't know. Is this worth it? If we have to make our own ads for our own podcast, surely we're doing something wrong. Surely we've made a huge miscalculation. Surely this must be a joke. Well, it's not a joke, and no matter what you do, you will die alone and afraid. Be sure to like and subscribe for more great episodes coming at you. Please note that this is not a real advertisement, and the company, brand, entity, or product mentioned in the preceding ad in no way endorses, agrees with, or knows about this podcast.